Free?
Yes.
Η Greek. Εγώ, Θεέ μου, είμαι μισός και μισός.
Δηλαδή Ιταλός και Ιταλός.
Όχι, είμαι από την Κρήτη. Γεννήθηκα στην Ελλάδα, στην Κρήτη. Και είμαι τώρα στην Αυστραλία όσο καιρό, όταν ήμουν 6 χρονών.
George Theodorakis did not know that Nakis was an informant working for his boss Don Thomas, nor that the meeting had been set up to make him believe that he'd cleared the first hurdle in cracking the so-called conspiracy. Chris Nakis, however, knew from the start that George was an undercover detective, but played dumb and pretended to swallow his unhappy migrant story without question.
Μπορείς να με βοηθήσεις?
Ναι, υπάρχει άνθρωπος που μπορεί να μας βοηθήσει, αλλά θα σε χρωστήσει.
Ναι.
Όλη η υπόθεση είναι χρηματική.
Πόσα λεφτά, πόσα?
Περίπου τις $2,000.
2.000, αλήθεια?
Αυτός τα παίρνει.
2.000.
Βέβαια. Και για τον κόπο μου, $200.
Πόσα?
200, για να ζήσω κι εγώ. Παιδιά, δεν έχω να φάμε. Εντάξει.
Εντάξει.
Maybe. Yeah.
Chris, to me, was what I'd describe as a little bit of a swifty, bit of a lad, and a little bit too smooth. On the first time I met him, I came away with a feeling that it was a little bit easy. Maybe I had put up barriers that really didn't exist. But in his particular case, he really wasn't the sort of person that I'd associate with.
Right, okay. Now, it's $2,000 for the other bloke, right? And then $200 for himself, for his efforts to introduce me to this other bloke.
Thomas later presented the contents of this tape to the Crown lawyers, the Attorney General, and the magistrate as proof that a massive conspiracy existed. George Theodorakis was just the first of many to be fooled. As a condition of the reward offer, Nakis was to introduce George into what he claimed was a conspiracy.
Hello?
Γεια σου, Δέμος. Ο Νάκης είναι. Άκου, έχω τον πελάτη και πρέπει να γίνει συνάντηση.
It seems he told Demos that George was violent, mentally disturbed, and had threatened to kill his estranged wife and child unless somebody helped him. Nakis arranged a meeting with Demos for the following day. Now, if George had been briefed to say that he was not sick and that he had heard that he could buy a pension, then that would have been a real test to see whether a fraud ring existed. But Demos probably would have refused to help him, and it seems that Inspector Thomas did not want to take that risk. So George indicated that his nerves were bad, which led Demos to treat him as he no doubt treated his other customers.
It's going to cost some money. All right?
All right.
Demos asked for $1,000 up front, with another $1,000 to be paid if and when George received his pension.
You have the money? Stop over here, please.
All right. On the secret instruction of Inspector Thomas, Nakis collected this $200 introduction fee, which was later presented by Thomas as real evidence of the way in which the conspiracy operated.
Keep the change.
Thank you. For George, this sham reinforced the sinister picture that had been painted by Inspector Thomas. The following day, Demos arranged for George to see a psychologist, John Castanos.
What do you got for me today?
Έχω κάποιον έξω. Είναι από την Κρήτη αυτός.
Demos repeated what Nakis had told him about George and warned Castanos to be careful.
Γιαννουλάκης, έλα. Κάτσε.
John Costanus.
I didn't have a great deal of problems assuming the role that Thomas and I had worked out. On one occasion, I did manage to squeeze out a couple of tears. That was straight out pure play acting. That was purely to set the scene. It was done very, very early in the piece so that I could lend a little bit of credibility to the personality that I was trying to project.
George's play acting was so successful that Castanos claims to have been convinced that he was suffering from mental illness.
Yes.
George, I'm going to show you 5 photographs here.
In later consultations, he coached George on how to embellish his symptoms so that he would have no difficulty in convincing doctors that he was genuinely ill.
Love, affection.
Is that right? Love and affection, is it?
Now we're getting somewhere.
Right.
My impression of Dr. Castanos, initially, I felt that he might have been a bit of a Robin Hood, that he might have been trying to help people that he felt were less fortunate. But then as the investigation progressed and I went through a number of consultations with him, I felt that he was embarking on a course that would lead him into problems legally.
Dr. Castanos readily admitted that he should not have helped George in this way. He acknowledged that it was unethical, but insisted that he was acting out of compassion because of what Demos had told him and because he felt sorry for George's plight. Now, as a psychologist, Dr. Castanos was not qualified to prescribe medication or issue medical certificates, so he referred George to a general practitioner, Dr. Thomas Moss. Dr. Moss believed George's story, which was supported by his psychological report.
To you, Doctor.
No, I had no reason whatsoever to suspect him of lying. It's normal medical practice for a GP to accept a psychologist's report. After all, he's trained to conduct psychological assessments. So it would have been superfluous for me to do any in-depth examination of him.
Dr. Moss issued George with a medical certificate, which entitled him to claim sickness benefits for 3 months. In subsequent visits, George told him that he was unable to sleep and that his nervous state was getting worse. Dr. Moss prescribed the appropriate medication and referred him to a psychiatrist, Dr. Nicholas Casamatis.
I had a very long consultation with Dr. Casamatis. It was very thorough, very probing, and I formed the opinion that he was doing the sort of job that one would expect a person in his position to do.
Sometimes I feel like I'm standing next to myself, sometimes. And that's when I get upset, because I can see myself.
You can actually see yourself?
Yeah.
It was difficult to establish the reason that he was visiting me. I thought he was ill, not very ill, but he had quite a number of problems. I had put it to him that the possibility of his visit was to gain a pension, which he agreed to, but he insisted that he was extremely ill. I didn't think he was pensionable, and I felt that should he pursue this line, he'll be a very disappointed man because he will be rejected by the Department of Social Security.
George's undercover work had come to an end. Dr. Casamatis was not prepared to give him a medical report which would support his pension application. One would have thought that this would demonstrate that no conspiracy existed between the doctors and that Demos had no special powers to get anyone a pension. However, Inspector Thomas was adamant that there was a case against the doctors. Acting on this belief, Inspector Thomas asked Social Security to help him compile a master list of all these doctors' patients who had Greek-sounding names and were on welfare benefits. This was a massive undertaking that had to be done by hand. So Social Security set up a special internal investigations unit to coordinate the task.
The investigative unit consisted of 2 or 3 people who were advised by management to cooperate in full with the federal police. The instructions were always verbal, and there was never anything ever given in writing. The investigative arm did no investigation whatsoever. It was purely a post office for the collection of the file papers for the Commonwealth Police.